Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric on a continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA DE-10 Nano board, and today what we're doing is we're continuing on our series comparing MiSTer to the #1 most recommended Super Nintendo emulator, and that is BSNES. I let people vote on this, and that's what they chose to be the most accurate representation of what we should compare against. Before we get too far involved, though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down there as well. And just like the previous comparison video, I'm only running the emulator and OBS for capture, and I'm using an i7 Intel processor and a GTX 1080 Ti, so there should be no system resource issues as far as running this at full speed. But one of the games that I'd love to compare is Kirby, because the intro is quite long and it allows us to link everything together to see whether or not anything gets out of sync, because the intros are 100% controlled by the game. There is no user input. So in a previous video we compared MiSTer to an original Super Nintendo entertainment system, or more specifically a Super Famicom. So what we're going to do now is transition to this same test. We're going to use MiSTer versus BSNES. And I love using the intro as a test because I can match the frame and sync lock them together so that each of these intros should be running at the same speed. And what I'm finding with BSNES, at least for the Kirby 3 intro, both audio sources are playing over top of one another right now, and they are locked. There is no drift in the audio, and all of the transitions in Kirby 3 are happening at the exact same time. So at least as far as the introduction is concerned, between MiSTer being FPGA and BSNES being software, they are identical from start to finish, which that means that the accuracy is there for both the MiSTer core and BSNES as a software emulator. But now taking a look at BSNES, everything looks exactly like I would expect Kirby to look. The colors are vibrant, everything is bright and cheery, all of the scaling looks great. I have zero complaints as far as how BSNES is handling the emulation for this particular game. We'll see if that holds true with all the games that I'm comparing, but at least off the start, when we go over to MiSTer, you're going to see that it looks near identical. I would say that the color vibrancy on MiSTer is a little bit brighter, and I think for Kirby that really does work because of those colors. But do remember that the MiSTer has to be captured through a capture card. BSNES is just going through OBS, so they are different devices because of course I can't plug a software emulator into the capture card. But let's move over to something different. Yoshi's Island. It used to be notoriously difficult to emulate because of the extra chips in the cartridge, but that's been solved a long time ago. So now we're just comparing it to see how those same transitions work. And outside of having to press a button to continue on the intro, everything links up exactly how we would expect again. So what I'm finding is, at least for things that are not user controlled, both MiSTer and BSNES are syncing everything up. But putting the games to a side-by-side comparison, I would say again that the MiSTer color vibrancy is slightly brighter by like 1 to 2%, and these are all things that can be adjusted. And when I talk about video color vibrancy, what I like to say is there is no right or wrong answer. If it looks good to you, that's perfectly fine, because every Super Nintendo revision had slightly different colors and different audio quality, and of course when you're using software emulation versus FPGA, that same color implementation is going to be slightly different. So it's not that one is doing a better or worse job, it's just that they're doing slightly different things to achieve the same results. But let's move on to Rockman X, because I want you guys to hear some of the music as well. So go ahead and listen to both the MiSTer version as well as the software BSNES version, and I'll be back in like 30 seconds and talk more about the direct comparison. But enjoy. You'll see I've just labeled them 1 and 2. One of them is MiSTer, one of them is BSNES. Leave a comment down below which one you think, and use this Castlevania 4 comparison to help you out. So yeah, leave me a comment down below. Which one do you think is MiSTer and which one do you think is BSNES? Is number 1 MiSTer or is number 2 MiSTer? Is number 1 BSNES or is number 2 BSNES? Both comparisons are the same numbers though. But moving on to Super Castlevania 4, everything looks near identical. Again, the MiSTer is just ever so slightly warmer in the color spectrum. It's not so much in the darks as it is in the reds and the browns. Those just get a little bit more intense. And that's how I remember Super Castlevania 4 looking. But again, when we talk about color profiles, it all comes down to an inexact science, because even like I said earlier, every console revision had a slightly different look. So if I'm comparing this against my Super Famicom and you're thinking what it looks like on a Super Nintendo one-chip console, you will get different results. But moving over to Super Mario Kart, a way more colorful game, I would say in this instance the colors are identical. And I wanted just to see again how everything felt. There's absolutely no perceivable lag in either core, whether it's MiSTer or BSNES, but the thing about software emulation is it is highly dependent upon your system. If you have a very old PC or you're running an i3, you may have some slowdown or some lag. I'm running a more modern processor, an Intel i7, so I'm not experiencing that. So what you need to realize is that these test results are individual to me and what you should expect to see if you have a relatively modern system with a modern processor in there, because software emulation is asking more of the hardware on a computer than MiSTer is asking when it's just dealing with that closed system in a very small operating system footprint. But as we cross the line with Yoshi in both MiSTer and BSNES, everything syncs up, all the transitions are identical. I can't tell any functional difference between playing these two games next to each other. But taking a look at Donkey Kong Country, in this instance the Japanese wrong, Super Donkey Kong, I wanted to see how everything looked in comparison when we're dealing with a lot of dark colors, not the traditional Super Nintendo kind of bright vibrancy. And I would say this really narrows the gap in appearance down between MiSTer and BSNES, because honestly I had to double check my timeline to make sure which one was which, because I couldn't visually tell. So as far as the color accuracy, the color science, and sort of the vibrancy is concerned between BSNES and MiSTer, I would say that this game is identical. If you put a MiSTer and a computer next to each other and you hid them from me and just handed me a controller, I honestly do not think I would be able to particularly detect the difference. But I will say I did find some slight variations between MiSTer and BSNES. It's not a 100% comparison, because if we move over here to Contra 3, the Alien Wars, I did the same thing with the intro. I synced them up per frame in the timeline, and what I find is BSNES does desync compared to MiSTer. And when I made the same comparison between MiSTer and my Super Famicom in an earlier video, I had no desync issues. I used that small laser beam the first frame it appears to link both of the sources up, and you'll see here, you may have to watch it once or twice, the screen transitions are going to separate. If you take a look at the right on BSNES, that switched 2 frames quicker than MiSTer did, so there is a slight desync between the both of those. But like I said, this is just an intro. It really doesn't affect gameplay whatsoever. So the main takeaway on this comparison, because people requested I used BSNES to compare against MiSTer, is that both are giving you extremely good results. Now, of course, MiSTer has the benefit, it is highly portable. I like taking my MiSTer to friends' house and playing games. I cannot do that with my PC, so I actually like that about MiSTer. It's a very small delineation. Of course, MiSTer costs money, and if you already own a PC, downloading emulators is cheaper. If you have to build a PC just for emulation, then MiSTer would actually be cheaper. But whatever you choose, you have great options for Super Nintendo emulation, whether it's software or FPGA replication of chips on those logic gates. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Don't forget to guess which source you think is number 1 and which source you think is number 2. I'll be back next Thursday with another comparison video in this MiSTer series, and I'll have videos on Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays as well. But yeah, any questions or comments, leave them down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Like I mentioned earlier, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.